Thank you, Angela, for the reading. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, no matter what we have done, no matter how far we have fallen, no matter what depths we have sunk to, you have been there, faithful, strong, committed to us. We ask, Father, that you would be here among us through your Spirit. We ask that your Spirit would speak through me, would speak to your people. For we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I, Deepak, take you, Alice, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for poorer, for richer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish from this day forward till death us do part. I have been married 17 years now, but I have never said these words. Alice and I had our wedding in a Marthoma church, and the bride and groom had very little to do. We sat there and watched the various priests do various things to us, and in the end we were, I guess, married. Well, what we had to do, I guess, is not run away. I guess we had something to do there, not panic and escape. It would have been nice to have had the opportunity to say these words, for I did enter this arrangement with exactly those kind of commitments. But I have never said those words and will never say those words. I fully intend this marriage to last till one of us dies, and if I am the one who survives, I fully plan to reach the grave as a widower unless Jesus has other plans and kind of short circuits that by coming back. In the couple of verses we are focusing on today, Jesus deals with the matter of the end of marriage, right? Divorce. Right? That's what we think he's dealing with. Yeah? And you have a Bible probably. It probably has a heading there. What does it have? Divorce. Yes. Divorce. And the next one is oaths or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so you want to know anything about divorce there's a section that says divorce. Yeah? 2 short verses. Now last week we saw with one word Jesus has upends a lot of things that we take for granted. And here we have 2 short verses. And it seems Jesus is very clear about his teaching. Yeah? Read it. No divorce except on grounds of adultery, and a divorced woman should not get remarried. That's what it says, very plain and simple, it would seem. But once again, if we draw that conclusion, we have not looked at the verses carefully enough, and we have not bothered about the context. So some points to observe. First, notice the phrase, anyone who divorces his wife. Yeah? Does nothing strike you as being out of place when you're reading that? Why not anyone who divorces her husband? Well, why is that not there? Why is the luxury, if you will, of initiating a divorce proceeding restricted to the husband? Why? And is it always the woman who is at fault? Some of you women who are married are thinking, we know better than that. The thing is, some of us husbands are thinking, we know better than that. Second, observe the phrase, except for sexual immorality or marital unfaithfulness, whatever your version has. Whose immorality is Jesus referring to, the husbands or the wives? Once again, you can conclude that if it's a husband who is initiating the divorce proceedings, he would probably, sweep his faults under the rug and not look at them, and then found fault with his wife. So certainly it would have not been the husband's errant ways that Jesus is talking about, right? The woman, yeah. So we can conclude that Jesus is speaking here about the wife's infidelity. Why not the husband? Why not the husbands? Do men not fall in this manner? As mentioned last Sunday, Jesus lived in an oppressively patriarchal society. And yet, we saw last time, he manages to speak within it to redeem it. And here Jesus takes his starting point, Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 to 4. Allow me to read it, yeah? If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her and sends her from his house, and if after she leaves his house she becomes the wife of another man, and her second husband dislikes her and writes her a certificate of divorce, gives it to her and sends her from his house, or if he dies, then her first husband who divorced her is not allowed to marry her again after she has been defiled. That would be detestable in the eyes of the Lord. Do not bring sin upon the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 1 to 4. Notice a few things that reveal that Deuteronomy pronounces legislation from a thoroughly male perspective. It is patriarchal through and through if you read it. First, the phrase, who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her. That's a long, long phrase. Yeah? But is it not possible for the husband to be displeasing to the wife? Is it not possible for the husband to do indecent things? Why does Deuteronomy not mention these? Second, observe the phrase, after she has been defiled. Does remarriage defile only the woman and not the man who is marrying her? Is it okay for a man to remarry? And if so, does he remain undefiled? A lot of questions. The passage in Deuteronomy and Jesus' words in our passage for today would have been taken in an oppressive way and have been taken in an oppressive way to impose patriarchal limitations on women. And hence it might come as a surprise to know that both Deuteronomy and Jesus are actually challenging the patriarchal position about gender relations inside a marriage. And you will be asking, how is that the case? So in order to understand this, we must first divest ourselves from our modern notions of marriage. Very, very important. We come to these passages thinking about marriage in a very modern way, when this is not a modern book. Deuteronomy was written, 3 millennia ago. Matthew's Gospel, 2 millennia ago. In languages none of us can speak, no one speaks them anymore, in fact. Languages none of us know how to figure out. In cultures that are totally foreign to us. And we must accept that and learn to deal with it. Today, most people in India would say, marriage is two categories, yeah? Arranged marriage on one side, love marriage on the other, and that's it. So I've heard people, so what's this, arranged marriage or love marriage, all those kind of things. And you also probably hear about that, yeah? But in the world in which Jesus lived, it was a different thing. It's a world of thoroughgoing patriarchy. And marriage served two very specific purposes. One purpose for the man, one for the woman. Please note what I'm saying. I am not saying this is God's plan or anything like that. I am saying in a patriarchal society, this is what marriage serves. It has a purpose. For the man, it provided him a way in which he could have heirs and continue his name and his family name. That is what marriage is for in a patriarchal society. For a man. Which is why, in many cases, if the wife does not give him a son, she is mistreated and put away. Sometimes killed. For the woman, it was a means by which she was supported and provided for. In her childhood, she would have been provided for by her father. in marriage she would be provided for by her husband, and should her husband die before she did, hopefully she had by then had a son who would provide for her while she was away. That is what marriage served. That's the purpose it had for women in a patriarchal society. This is the perspective within which Jesus is speaking, within which Deuteronomy is speaking. And both are addressing the first husband of the woman. Please note who is being addressed. The woman is not being addressed. It is the first husband who is being addressed. Both Jesus and Deuteronomy are telling him, be very, very careful when you think about divorcing your wife. Very careful. Because once divorced, she cannot be yours again. Do not be flippant and shallow and think about reasons that are not strong enough to put her away. Because once you do that, she cannot come back to you. This decision to make is irreversible. It is being told to the man in the patriarchal society. Deuteronomy uses the language of defiling because that would have resonated with a patriarchal male. She has slept with another man. She is impure. That is how a patriarchal man would have thought. And it is highlighting that point, using that language. This is the genius of Scripture, and we fail to realize it. The genius, it uses the language of the oppressor in order to undermine the oppressor. Think twice, because at the later date, if you want her back, she is defying the language, causing a patriarchal male to think, oh my God, that is the outcome of this decision that I will make. Because the woman would have had no choice in that society. She would have had to find a man to provide for her, which means she would have had gotten married again. Irreversible. And it uses the language that the male would have resonated with and would have found, I don't want to go there. Maybe I should take sleep. Sleep on it, think about it, wake up tomorrow, then see what my decision is. And we all know, you sleep over something, next day you make a better decision. No hasty decisions. Jesus uses the language of adultery to hammer home his point. If you divorce your wife, he says, you automatically becomes a person who supports adultery. Yeah, you cause her to become an adulteress. If you divorce her, she becomes an adulteress. Because, again, the same situation, she has to find another man to support her. And so she will get married. And so Jesus is saying, you divorce your wife, automatically you are aiding and abetting adultery. Automatically. And this a patriarchal man would not want to do. Because whether we like it or not, the wife was considered the property of the man, of the husband. And then it would be to damage someone else's property. I'm sorry, women, but you have to think about it in this way. Sorry, men, you have to. This is the perspective within which it is writing. And we come to it with notions of, our notions of marriage does not work. Which is why all these scriptures have been misused time and time again. Both Deuteronomy and Jesus are actually protecting a woman in a patriarchal society in which they had very, very few rights, if any. And in which, in most cases, even those specious rights would have been abused and trampled upon. He is focusing on the person who has power and telling him, you are going to land up into trouble if you do this. That was then. And here we are, 20 centuries later. The world looks different today than it did 20 centuries ago. Things are not as good for women yet as they should be, but certainly not as bad as they used to be. Mind you, I'm not justifying any of the horrors that women go through today and still endure. I'm not doing that. But there are some horrors that used to exist that don't exist now. That is all I'm saying. Jesus' words and the words of Deuteronomy are fear-based. That's why when we sang that opening hymn, that line just struck me. I was going to talk about this, and it says, Jesus, whose name charms our fears and bids our souls, who charms our fears. But here he uses fear. He's playing on the fear of the patriarchal male, the fear of losing honor in the eyes of one's peers and in society. Being shamed in public, that is the fear that the male had. And you know that even today. What will people think? How often have parents used that? Have I used that as a father? What will people think? Always, I should not lose my honor. I should not be publicly shamed. That is what we always think. Where these fears genuinely exist today, Jesus' words remain the same. Patriarchy may consider the wife to be the property of the husband, but the husband must view her qualitatively different than any of his other possessions. Qualitatively different. Because if you get rid of a chair, you can get a chair back. Not so with your wife. She is qualitatively different. What would Jesus say to us today who don't live with those fears? Today it is very likely that both the husband and the wife bring home a paycheck. Very likely. So the wife is not totally at the mercy of her husband for her support and provision. The wife is also now, in most countries, able to initiate divorce proceedings. So this also is no longer the prerogative only of the husband. So what would Jesus say to us today in this completely different context from which he was speaking? To realize we cannot simply take the words in the page because we are not in that context anymore. We have to ask ourselves, what would Jesus say to us given our situation, so that the spirit of what he said to them remains the same. So to understand this, we would have to then go to another passage in Matthew where Jesus has a little lengthier, not long enough probably for us, but a lengthier passage where it probably also says teaching on divorce. Matthew chapter 19. Turn and tell me what your Bible says is the heading. Chapter 19, the start of it. Divorce. Again, you want to know about, these are the two passages that Matthew has. Matthew chapter 19. I'm not reading it all. It's verses 2 to 9 specifically. But Jesus quotes from Genesis chapter 2. And then he adds, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate. Any of you who are married would have probably had this verse read during your wedding ceremony. 99% of the time it would have. Otherwise it's the Ephesians chapter or something like that. But very likely this, Jesus' commentary on marriage. And so this raises now a few questions. I love it, right? You're wondering, God, this guy and his questions. When will he stop? Jesus has to take me away. I'll return. But then I have questions for him too. Oh gosh. Alright, so many questions. Does God bless child marriage? Does God bless a marriage in which one party has been forced, maybe a gun pointed to his or her head? You know it happens. You know it happens. And if scripture has nothing to say to us in real life, then we need to chuck it away. You know it happens. Does God unilaterally bless a marriage in which one spouse is abusing the other? Does God bless a marriage that is solemnized in the name of another deity? Does God permit a man to have multiple wives? And if so, does he bless the second, third, fourth, fifth marriage? We cannot sit in our little cocoon of evangelical Christianity and our views of marriage and then speak about what Jesus would have to say to us today. We have to look at the world and say, these are the situations that exist. Jesus either has something to say to all those situations, or he has nothing to say to me. There are many ways in which humans have devised aberrations to God's plan. Do we think that Jesus blesses marriages of all sorts is the question I'm asking. And I don't think so. And I'm sure many of you also do not. Surely all of us have some reservation at least about child marriage. Out of all that I specified. At least about child marriage. What would we do if a 10-year-old girl were married to a man? Would we then simply say, well, there has been no sexual immorality, hence let no one separate? We would be sentencing that girl to abuse at least for the first few years of her marriage. These are serious things. And we have to ask ourselves, what does Scripture have to say about these kind of things? Very likely we would act if we had the opportunity. Act. Knowing that God does not bless abuse. But then if you ask, if he does not bless this abuse, what abuse does he bless? Oops. Pandora should have just kept that box closed. Because as soon as you start asking one question, there are 10 more that come around. Then you can't stop the questions. Is it okay? Is Jesus, please note, I have to put him on the dock here. Is Jesus okay with a husband beating his wife or a wife beating her husband? Is he okay with that? If we ask them to stick together, is he okay with that? If you tell them to stay together when the husband is beating the wife, let's say, you say, to her, Jesus does not allow. He's not been unfaithful, your husband. Just beating you senseless every night. Jesus does not allow divorce for that. What you're saying is Jesus is okay with what she's going through. That is what you're saying. Whether you would say it aloud or not. Jesus, I know, is not okay with that. It's not. Is an abusive relationship in a marriage, it doesn't become a marriage because there was a priest or a pastor at the wedding who solemnized it. Is that what makes it? Or, because there was a judge or a magistrate in a court. Is that what makes the marriage? Is an abusive relationship a marriage simply because it was held in a church? Is that what makes the marriage? Surely you're not thinking it's the humans involved or the place where it was conducted that are important. Surely not. But please note what Jesus is saying. What God has joined together. We treat the Sermon on the Mount as a legal document. It is nothing of the sort. It is not a legal document. Please don't read it like that. Because when we do, we find it oppressive. We read it, and I've heard this so many times. When I tell them, that people will talk about different passages, I say, you start with the Sermon on the Mount, you understand that, then we can talk. Because this is where Jesus starts his teaching. And he's got a huge chunk of it. You understand this, implement it, try at least, then we can talk about the other passages. that are more complex. And then people say, who can live up to that? That is too high. And so because it is too high, we don't try. The Sermon on the Mount is not Jesus forcing on us some unachievable ideal so that we can then discount his teachings. So what is Jesus doing here in this passage? He is not telling us the conditions under which divorce can be taken. He's been unfaithful, or she's been unfaithful, or whatever it is. He is not telling us that. But if you just read it, that's what we get. Because we've not looked at the entire context and the spirit. What Jesus is doing is challenging his people. Remember, I told you this is not an evangelistic document. You don't show the Sermon on the Mount to bring someone to Jesus. This is for those who had already decided to follow him. If you're following him, here you go. This is what he has to say. How his people should behave. Jesus is challenging his people with God's original intent. He is asking husbands and wives to work on their marriages with devotion and faithfulness so that it can truly be a marriage within which it can be said what God has joined together. So you have to ask yourself, is my marriage something that is reflective of the statement, what God has joined together? He is telling us that what makes a marriage, right? He's telling us what makes a marriage, not what breaks it. And our headings are wrong. He is, strangely enough, teaching us about marriage here, not about ending it. What makes a marriage is God's presence in it. What God has joined. Not what the judge or magistrate or priest or pastor has joined. What God has joined. What makes a marriage is two fallible people failing every single day to live up to their commitments to each other, but who are resolute about sticking together. That is what makes a marriage. What makes a marriage is two individuals realizing that they are on a journey together. And yes, they can make another journey without the other. But that they made a commitment one day to that other person. And so, like the God they worship, they will live up to that commitment. That is what makes a marriage. It is within marriage. Martin Luther, he said marriage is the great crucible within which men were tested. And I think men, literally not just humans, but men. That you develop patience and all that. I'm a little slow with this. But marriage, it is in this that the greatest strains on one's commitments are to be found. The greatest pressures, stretch. Your commitments are always taut. This other person bugs you day in and day out. He or she is there with his or her preferences and priorities. There. And they happen most often than not to be different than yours. Bugs you day in and day out. This person is there invading your space. Whether you like to say it or not in public, it is there. Requiring you therefore to change. If any of you have been married for a while, you know you're different than the person you were on that wedding day. You're different. You didn't plan on being different. But it happened. Because that other person is there day in and day out bugging you. And so where is the last straw? Which is the straw that breaks this camel's back? Right? Jesus tells us Not in this passage, but all over the place. And the scriptures are full of this. You were thoroughly unfaithful to me. Thoroughly. Yet I was faithful. I am faithful. I have not let you go. I will not let you go. I am here to bug you day in and day out. That is what Jesus does. And if he's not bugging you, invite him to do so. We have played this evangelical thing of Jesus being comfort and all that too long. He needs to bug you. Literally bug the hell out of you, right? That's what he does. He needs to bug you day in and day out. And so he says, I'm here to bug you day in and day out. And then in like manner, husbands and wives, you should be faithful. Should forgive unfaithfulness. Should remain together. Should bug each other day in and day out. Because when you consider what God has joined together, there is no last straw. There is no last straw. Amen. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, who sent His Son to die for us at Calvary when we were steeped in our sins. You showed us that love. We ask, Father, that all of us would recognize the depths of that love and would try very, very hard to reproduce that love in our lives with the people we encounter, especially for those of us who are married, with the person who bugs us day in and day out. Enable us to stick with each other no matter what. For we ask this in Jesus' name. We'll be moving to communion now.